Hey guys, my name is Nabiri. Today we're going to walk through my track We Will Decay, which was released in 2025. And because my Patreon just went live, you're going to be able to download all the stems from the link in the description. There's just going to be a few ones missing because I don't want to get into any copyright issues. The way that we're going to do this walkthrough is basically by how I made it. I'm first going to show you where I got the inspiration, because that video is just too amazing and you don't want to miss out upon. Then we're going to talk about the break, the leads and the build-ups. I'm going to show you the final pre-drop and also how I created the final kick.
Your kind cling to your flesh, as if it will not decay and fail you. One day the crude biomass that you call a temple will wither, and you will beg my kind to save you.
So these top two tracks over here and a few over here are ones that you won't find in the link in the description, just for copyright reasons. But I still want to talk about the break because I didn't want to go just with that sample and call it a day. I did put some samples behind there to really build up that vibe that I was going for with this track. And they're mainly samples from Epidemic Sound, like this. With the sound effects I was able to get closer to the vibe I was going for, besides the already dark nature of the sample from the video. So after I had the break from the sample, I felt I immediately had to go into the melody, because it already took quite a long time for the break, but now we needed to give energy for the melody. And for this melody I took 7 layers and layered them out like such. I have 4 layers for my melody and 3 layers for my chords. My 4 layers for my melody are all routed to my top boss and they sound like this. And then we have the chords which are routed to their own bus and they sound like this. And together with all that reverb it sounds nice and huge. So something I do when I have my full lead on the dry leads bus, so these are all my layers coming together, I have this passive EQ, and this passive EQ is really great to get a nice high end for your leads. If we turn this down all the way, it's gonna sound a little bit too dull. And this plugin just really adds a nice bright high end that your leads need. Besides that, you might wonder why my volume on my leads bus is like here. And on the wet leads bus, they stay at around here. That's because of a few effects that I put on my wet leads bus. I have a soft clipper in here, and the soft clipper takes away a few of the edges from the top of the volume. And I also use K-clip. And K-clip is really nice because we have this delta function here and we can literally hear what it's clipping off. That's already quite much, but it's okay because with this leads or with this plugin, we're doing this in a controlled fashion instead of just hoping that the mastering section doesn't take away too much from the leads. I really recommend that you use some soft clippers and hard clippers to kind of compress your sound a little bit, get some more loudness in there before even going to the master section. Now let me just mute the reverb and show you what I did for my tonal sounds, my break elements. Basically we went a little bit with a orchestral kind of vibe. And we start off with a nice sub bass and my brass section. And these give the right fundament to have a nice orchestral sound on there. So we have our strings over here that we add to it, and also our choir. But you don't want to just stay with organic elements basically. You can also put some different sounds in there, like this ARP that I have. This pad, which gives it a little bit more space. And also this other one over here. And this already sounds huge behind the lead. So if we only take these sounds and turn the reverb back on, it's already gonna sound big. Then of course if we're going to put our leads in front, it's going to sound even bigger, and that's what you want when you're going to work on your lead section. Now besides having the intricate layered background sounds behind my lead, I'm a firm believer of that you need to put more behind there to really tell the story in your track. These samples are from the sample that I took the inspiration from, basically, and these give some more vibe to the rest of the background. But they don't stand out too much to be worried about really stealing something, in my opinion at least. They are giving a nice character and vibe to the whole thing, but they're not that prominent. Now onto the build-ups, because in the build-up something interesting happens. I had this static bass line first, and in my build-up I switched this to a regular kick. Sometimes in your build-ups you can actually just use your kick from your drop, put the volume a little bit softer, and put the filter on top of there, so that you just have that low-end rumble from the kick. And it's gonna give you the drive and the feeling of that kick without showing it too much yet. So you don't need to worry too much about how to transition from one low end to the next if it's just in a short bit. This kick drum really gives the foundation of this whole build-up. If you listen to this kick drum is really prominent. Now halfway through my build-up I'm adding some effects over here. And I'm taking away this kick drum because that took low end, and I'm adding this small sub drop. And I also had this other effects which I created a long time ago, and this basically fit well with this sub drop and the whole vibe. So the sub drop over here ends because then the fill open up brings its own low end to the mix. So we don't need to worry and put too much low end there anymore. Now after having these few layers really bringing the fullness from the break into the build-up, we need to build more tension with percussion. So if you're gonna take a full nice percussion section, we're gonna take that with a lot of different elements. This one is with a snare. And as you can see, this one filters open. We have a clap. And nothing really too special happens to this except for a volume cut. And besides that, we also have some other stuff. I always like to use some loops like this, because it gives a little bit more of an organic sound or organic rhythm basically to my build-ups. And I have my build-up snare. This build-up snare is something I just always use in all my build-ups because it kind of gives me this effect of a riser without having to use a riser. So it's my way of building tension. Of course we have some crashes. And that's it for my percussion section. Oh, before I forget, these are just some simple rides which go down in volume. But all of these percussion sounds together. And these sounds help to bring the fullness to this build-up. But it's very important to take note of this. All these sounds go down in volume. All the percussion sounds, all the break sounds, everything. You need to do this because your build-up is going to build tension, but it doesn't need to build in loudness. That tension is going to come from the rhythm speeding up, from your break pitching up, from using risers and that type of stuff, and not from becoming louder. You want it to become more quiet, because if it becomes more quiet, then your drop afterwards will feel like it hits harder. Now there's a reason I want to show you this pre-drop, because I actually got stuck with the track at this moment. I had some great intros, some great lead sounds, and it really had a nice vibe, but I just didn't know how to take it further. And I went to search for different screeches, different sounds, but in searching different stuff, I went way too far from the original subject. So I want to tell you, if you're feeling stuck, look at the sounds you already have and see if you can reuse them to make something new out of there, because it will make you stick to one subject. But what I did to break out of this loop is basically just take my top leads and make a melody like this. So the rhythm and the melody that's in here is a little bit more screech-like, but the sound is still a lead, so it doesn't have that filthiness. But to get that more filthy stuff in there, I wanted to add some distortion, and then we're gonna add some rift. Adding some rift is just really great because it had all those options with the cutoff and the movement in there. So on the top bus, we have our rift over here. which has two different parts of distortion. And you're gonna see here with my filter that the spread, resonance and cutoff are gonna move, and that will create a more screechy type of vibe for this pre-drop. So it just creates a little bit more movement and a little bit more screechiness into that top lead. So sometimes you can do that. I wouldn't recommend that for like full-on melodic tracks, because having a full distortion this much on top of your top bus is probably gonna be a little bit too much. But for something like this, to create a kind of screech out of your melody, it will work just fine. So behind here I did add my chords, because that would add a little bit more size behind there. And something else that it would add is a little bit more stereo. If we take a look at this screech and melody part, you can see that we don't have any low end and we have a lot of stereo information. And that's very important, because then we can take our kick and make this a lot more mono, on the contrary to what I showed you in my intro. In the intro my kicks are more wide and my screech is more narrow, but this is the other way around over here. As you can see from this kick over here, this kick is a lot more merged. So this kick really stays in the middle. I can even show you like this. See, it's a lot more in the middle. And then our screeches, melody, lead thing, how you want to call it, is really going to stick nicely around there. And the final thing that I really want to cover about this track breakdown is the final build-ups over here. And I want to emphasize all the effects that are in here. If you take away all these effects, it sounds like this. And that's basically just a normal build-up. But with all these extra effects in here, we're gonna get so much more of a story. And let me show you what I put behind there. So a little listener discretion advised, because there's gonna be some like torture-y kind of sounds. I added some samples from Epidemic Sounds again, and these samples are just great because they really build that atmosphere of that dark and gritty and fucked up vibe. So this screech that I add over here, it's nice and dark, but we can distort this even further to make that kind of like futuristic vibe, that futuristic cruel vibe that I was going for. So with our rift over here, we're gonna use this mainly for a bit crush. And then I need to lower this volume again, because we add this distortion after there, and then it's gonna become way too loud. As you can see, this is fully opened all the way, and yeah, the mix is almost completely opened, it's just loud. So yeah, that's cute to build my world for this track. Then I have this corrective EQ where I take away the low end, and then I finish it off with a volcano for just some necessary filter movements. Some low cuts, high cuts, wherever it was necessary in the full arrangement. Of course, this already brings a dark atmosphere, but he needs a reason to scream, in my opinion. So that's why we have this one over here. So my poor fellow is enjoying a nice back stretching, and it just goes a little bit too far. After that we have this nice and futuristic fill, because it's still a futuristic track. Basically some kind of robot kind of sound. That's just cool. And in the second part of our build-up, we're basically going to implement the same stuff from the first part. Where we had people screaming over there, I have people screaming over here. They're literally just on the same mixer channel. One is more panned to the left and the other one is panned more to the right. And that's to create a nice stereo section. But yeah, without this chain, it's just some torture sounds, and we actually put the same chain on there. So we have our bit crush from Rift, and all the other stuff that is correcting just in the same way as the previous screech. And now if you put all those sounds over our build-up, you're gonna hear how much more of a story it basically tells while still having that tension that it's building. Just listen. For the final drop, I really want to show you all the stuff that's on top of this kick, and then afterwards I'll show you how this kick was made, because this one was actually quite unique for me as well. Now again, you see from the imager and from span that there's no low end in here and there's just a lot of stereo in there. And the mono side of this will be filled up more with the kick, and the low end will also be filled up with the kick. So we make more space for our kicks when we have our other sounds. That's all you need to do to get a nice balanced drop. Make space for your kicks and put your kicks in there, and it's gonna sound nice and great. So now let me show you how I created the final kick from this track, because it's actually quite memorable for me. I had everything for the final drop ready, but I just didn't know what kind of kick to put in there. So let's dive in Serum and let me show you how I created that one. If you're familiar with my Serum kick tutorials, you can see in oscillator A that I started this off in a fairly normal way. But afterwards it took a weird turn very quickly. So starting off with this downward pitching sine, it sounds like this. Then we add our second oscillator, and this second oscillator is pitched up by 2 octaves, and there is no pitching on here, which is quite weird for how I normally do my punches. If we then add our distortion, and this time I went with a down sample just to go for something else. Now we can add our filter, and this still doesn't really help creating a solid punch. So I went to take a different route to make it more of a punch. I put this Serum in my mixer, and on my mixer I added the distortion, just to add some more distortion that will give the punch more power. Now it at least sounds powerful, but we still need to tweak this so that it sounds more like a punch. And that's where our final 2 effects come in, with a hyper dimension and an EQ to turn this into punch that I didn't even know that I needed. So I just showed you how I created this sample. And we took away the transient of here, and I added in another transient from a different kick. If we put these two together, we can still distort them and EQ them a little bit further to glue them together. You see that the transient really just ends before the full punch body comes in basically. So if we take this one for the punch body and this one for the click, we route them together, there's still some space for EQ and distortion. If we then add one EQ, this EQ is there to boost the right frequencies of the tone that we had in our punch. If we then further distort that, and this time I did that with Rift, that's really honestly why we often EQ and then distort, because finishing off with that distortion really brings the full power of the punch back again. Then I give it this small other EQ, where we really just take away some of the frequencies that we don't need, especially these low mids and this one over here. If you listen to this one, it's just a little bit awkward, and here, this is what the punch needed to become more powerful. Then I took my rumble, which I created from the punch, by giving it a high cut and some Valhalla room, so it gets this nice rumble, and it sounds like that. And we add a small peak like this underneath our punch. Very quietly, but this kind of glues our punch and our tail together. So here's how it sounds if we mute it and loop it. It's a very small detail. As you can even see over here, it's quite soft, but it does do something that's important for this kick. But now what we miss is the actual crunch of this kick. And we're gonna get that by adding this punch reverb and some automation on the volume. The automation of the volume is really what brings that drive into this kick. Because then we have this rumble, here the punch reverb, we add some EQ on here, just to add some little bit more of these mid frequencies. And then we route these two to one bus where we add our distortion, and that distortion already starts making it crunchy. If we then EQ this a little bit more, boost the bass, then we have a nice and finished still. And then all that's left to do is put everything together into here, and we give it a nice master chain with an Oxford inflator, and we just push this a little bit so it becomes louder. If you learned something from this video, let me know in the comments down below. If you haven't yet, leave a like and a subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!